let's get started. Let me bring up our graphic for today. The topic for today is 2D physics, fun with effectors. And so what we're going to be using are the new 2D effectors, which were added in Unity 5. And basically what they are is they allow us to add physics forces or change the physics behavior of rigid bodies in certain parts of our 2D games. So you can use them to make an area that gives a character a speed boost. You can use them to make sort of bomb and black hole type effects that push and pull things. There's a new platform effector, which is pretty useful to make one-way platforms. There's an area effector that you can use to kind of make areas that move objects. And so we're going to take a look at all of those, and we're going to do it using the 2D platformer package from the Asset Store, which is a free package from the Asset Store under the publisher Unity Technologies. But we're not going to be doing a lot of complicated scripting or anything. I'm going to be more demonstrating the 2D physics features, the effector features, and giving you guys some ideas about ways that you can use those in your own games. So what you should be seeing now is a blank Unity project, which is set to the 2D default. So I just went to New Project, set the default to 2D. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab the assets that I linked in the chat. I'm going to go to the Asset Store. For those of you guys watching in the archive, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And we're just going to grab a couple of things, two assets here. I'm just going to search for 2D platformer in the search. And importantly, I want the free one from Unity Technologies right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit import since I've already downloaded this. It's going to decompress the package, and it's going to allow us to choose what to import. We are going to import everything. And then we're just going to grab one sprite from the 2D pack asset package as well, which is going to be our coin sprite. All right, so here's the import settings for our 2D platformer. We're not going to change anything here. Just leave it all checked and hit import. That's going to bring that in. It's going to take a little moment. Just let this cook. So yeah, we're really just going to use the character controller from this. We'll use one of the enemies as well. Now, if you guys are interested in a more thorough look at, for example, the script for the character controller, the way the jumping and the movement is done, I did do another live training walking through that script, which is in the live training archive on the unity3d.com learn section. When this API update message comes up, just go ahead and say, I made a backup. Go ahead. That is going to update the scripts in the package from Unity 4 to Unity 5. There's a couple different things in the API now that need to be updated, which, generally happen automatically. If they can see, even if you add scripts in the middle of a project and it sees that you're using old syntax, usually it's pretty good about letting you know and fixing them auto-magically. So then I'm just going to go ahead and search for 2D pack. And we're just going to grab, again, the free one from Unity Technologies, 2D pack. And we're just going to go to import. In your case, it may be download if you haven't downloaded it before. And then in the import dialog, we're going to set this to none. And we're just going to go down and grab one single sprite, which is down here at the bottom, coin sprite. There it is. There's our coin. Hit import. And that is all we need. So let's just get a little demo scene going here before we get into the effector stuff. I'm going to grab in my prefabs folder under characters our hero. And we're just going to take him and drop him in the scene. Drag the prefab in. We'll zero out his position on the X, Y, and Z or Z axes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to child the main camera to the player, right? So when the player moves, the camera's going to move with him. And I am actually going to use the perspective mode for the camera. We're going to do a little parallax stuff, and I'm actually going to be using some 3D platforms. And I just kind of like the way it looks in perspective mode. It's not strictly necessary. And then we'll set the field of view a little wider, maybe to 80. Okie doke. Now, The other thing we're going to do, there's a couple scripts we're not going to use on the player, which will throw errors. So we're going to take those off. We're going to take off the player health and also lay bombs. And on the main camera, I'm just going to turn off the audio listener. He just has some little sounds that he makes, which I think are a little distracting during the demo. So I'm just going to turn off the audio listener. That's turning off all audio in the scene. You guys don't have to do that if you don't want to, but this is just, it's a little easier for me to present. Okay, so the first thing that we need is a platform for him to stand on and to jump off of. Now, one important thing about the way this character is configured is that he's raycasting towards the ground, looking for an object that is on a layer called ground. And if you want more on how that's done, you can check out the other training where I go through the script. But for now, you just have to take my word for it. So we're going to make a box and put it on the ground layer so that the player can jump. So we're going to go up to Game Object, 3D Object, Cube. Now, of course, we could totally be doing this with sprites, but since I just want to create a bunch of stuff quickly and there's no easy like create 2D square in Unity as of now, I'm just going to use 3D geometry and put 2D colliders on it. So I'm going to scale my platform here to 20 along the X. We can leave the other defaults. And I'm also just going to add a light, directional light, and just zip it up out of the way there to just to light these boxes. And you'll see, because we're in perspective mode, we'll get this little 3D look to the platforms, which I think I like that mix of 2D and 3D. It's kind of cool, but whatever, not that important. Okay, so we'll call this cube platform 1. And now, now let's add our 2D collider to this. So I'm going to take off the box collider, which is the 3D collider, which is added by default. So we're going to click on the little gear icon and choose Remove Component. And then we're going to add a component. And we're going to go to Physics 2D, Box Collider 2D, right? Important to get the 2D there. This is all the physics stuff works with the 2D physics components. You can't mix 2D and 3D physics components, right? So that's why I'm adding a 2D collider to this 3D object. And now, if we play our scene, it's going to repack the sprites. That's fine. Boop. Our player drops down. And we can see I can't yet jump, right? Because as I explained before, we need to be on the layer ground, which I haven't done yet, right? I mentioned it, but I didn't do it. So I hit the jump button, player can't jump. So if that happens to you, that's why. So with the platform highlighted, we're going to go up to Layer and choose Ground. Now, this was added when we downloaded this package. Because this is a complete project, it downloaded the layers. It's not really normal for asset store packages to download things like layers and tags, but because this is from Unity and in the complete projects category, it will actually download those project settings for you. Okay, let's try it again. Boop, there we go. So we can jump, we can move. I'm using WASD to move. Very nice. Okay, so now I'll show you the problem that we're trying to solve using our first effector type. I'll show you the problem that we're trying to solve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my platform 1, choose Edit, Duplicate, which on a Mac you can do with Command D. On a PC, that'll be Control D. Duplicate it, and then I'm going to move it up and move it over. And I'm going to leave a little overhang there. And so what you guys may have seen before, if you've worked with making platform games, is this, right? Which is not the behavior. If you've played Mario or any of the kind of classic platformers, you expect to be able to jump up through the platform, right? And so this is the problem that the platform effector solves. So I'm just going to highlight my 2 platforms here, and we're going to go to Add Component, Physics 2D, and we are going to choose down at the bottom the Platform Effector 2D. And now you'll see the one-way parameter for the Platform Effector 2D is on by default. And this is really the main thing that this does. Now we get a warning down here. This effector will not function until there is at least one enabled 2D collider with Used by Effector checked on this game object. That is because the Used by Effector parameter in the Box Collider 2D is not yet on, right? And so this is going to tell the effector this is the collider that we want to use with the effector. And this is going to be true for the other effectors that we're going to be using. So this is a new parameter in all the 2D colliders. So we're going to turn that on. Our warning goes away, and now, whoop, woohoo, we can jump up through the platform and have nice platform-like behavior. Now, the other settings here we have are side friction and side bounce. This is, are we going to use the current physics material, which is currently set to none, for the side interactions? I find they're not super important because it's pretty rare to have a lot of platform side interactions in this mode, because usually you're passing through it coming up, but you can try them. There we go. See, now he's stuck on the side there. But, you know, it's, I would just say test them out. I tend to leave them off. And then the side angle variance allows us to, at 0, it just means it's a straight line like this, and then we could cant it to 45 degrees or whatever if we had uniquely shaped edges. I'll let you guys experiment and discover that. So Platform Effector 2D, super simple. Basically just allows us to create these one-way platforms that we can jump through. So let's just duplicate one more of these. We'll make another one. And then what I'm going to do is make my next thing, which is going to be using a Surface Effector 2D, which allows us to make kind of conveyor belt style or sort of slide type platform. So I'm just going to duplicate this and let's rotate it. Actually, first of all, let's leave it straight, and I'll just show you what it looks like straight so you can get an idea. We're going to remove the Platform Effector 2D component, and we're going to add Physics 2D. Where is it? Surface Effector 2D. Used by Effector is still on, so we're going to keep that. And then let's set the speed of this to 50. And now, whoop. So we can create these platforms that slide you along. So I'm going to use this to make a little, other way, to make a little sort of slide, which is kind of fun. Sort of a little bit Sonic-like, right? And then drop it down, and maybe we'll make this one a little canted this way. 2 of those. And then maybe one of these guys going the other way. So a little sort of zip. Let's give that a try. Whoop. Woo. And for fun, right, we can make this nice and strong. Now, one thing that you may notice, I am using the 5.0 patch. Whoop. What was that? A little glitch in the matrix there. I'm using the 5.0 patch 1. And the behavior of the surface effectors is actually different from 5.0 to 5.0 patch 1. The guy who's responsible for these made some tweaks after the fact, so they behave a little bit differently between those 2 releases. So if you want to know which one you have, you can go to About Unity, and you'll see it up here, the version number. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little sort of launcher at the end of this to fire him off of here, and we're going to do that using an area effector. So, well, here, before I do that, let me talk you through the parameters that we have here. So the collider mask just means what is going to be affected by this, right? We've got it set to everything, which is fine. The speed is how much speed is added. Speed variation allows us to add a random amount of, or add or subtract if you use a negative number. So let's say if I add 50, we're going to have between 50 and 100, right? 50 plus 50 units of force added each time the physics update loops while we're in contact with the effector. The force scale allows us to, it's a scalar value for the force. Use contact force. Should the impulse force, but that's a typo, should the impulse force be applied to the contact point, Applying the force at the contact point may cause the target to rotate. Oh, yes. Okay. So what can happen here, this is actually different from in the patch. But basically, if you had, let's say, actually, this guy's a good example. He's got multiple colliders. So we could just be applying, I think his rotation is frozen. Yeah, he's fixed angle. But if he wasn't, we could be applying force just to this collider and cause him to tip over. And we'll actually see that a little better with, I'll show you that with the area. The area effectors are maybe a better example. And then, of course, we can choose whether or not to use friction or use bounce, which will be set by the physics material 2D, which is currently set to none. And we're going to add a area effector 2D to make we'll make like a little force field kind of thing so you can get the idea. So what I'm going to do, let's duplicate this last platform. We'll change the name and call it force field. And let's actually make a material for it just so we can keep track of what it is. I'm going to go create, in my materials folder, create material. We'll call this red force field. And we're going to set the rendering mode to transparent and the albedo color all the way to red. And drop that on our force field. Let's make this force field 1 because I think we're going to do 2 of these. And let's make this a little wider. We'll scale up the Y. Maybe make it like so. Maybe a little longer as well. Scale up the X. Something like that. All right. Now, let's take off. Is that rendering? Oh, I didn't change the color. That's not transparent. Let's make it transparent. I'm going to set the albedo alpha to transparent. There we go. And actually, let's just, for fun, let's just make our scene look a little nicer. We're going to go to our main camera, which is a child of the hero. And I'm going to move him over here just so we don't have to jump through all that stuff to test. We can go back to the beginning. And then what we're going to do, we're going to change the background color of the main camera to something more sky-like. Nice blue color. And I'm going to add some clouds, some pretty little clouds from the environments folder. Prefabs, environment, clouds, env clouds. Drop it in. And I'm actually going to, in keeping with my perspective camera, I'm going to use the 3D mode to make a little parallax with these clouds. So I'm going to turn off 2D mode for a sec. We can see that our 2D scene is actually 3D. I'm going to duplicate my clouds, push them back. Push them up and back. So I'm just doing Command D and then moving them. We'll just make like a bunch of them. Shift them to the side a little bit. Just kind of shift them around. Maybe have some close ones too. Just a bunch of clouds. It's totally non-functional, just for fun. All right, let's see how that looks. Lots of clouds. But what we can see when we play the scene, that parallax. Okay, so, woo. All right, so let's now get our force field going here. So what I'm going to do, let's go to the force field, and we are going to remove the surface effector 2D. So remove component, and we're going to add component, physics 2D, area effector 2D. Now, importantly, we get a warning here when we do this. This collider is trigger unchecked, but this should be checked when used with the area effector 2D component, which is designed to work with triggers. So we want our character to be able to enter into the volume. Let's go back to 2D mode here. We want our character to be able to enter into the volume of the force field, so to be in the middle of it where it's going to be affected by forces. You can use it with a regular non-trigger collider, but then the force is only going to be applied when you're in contact with the surface, which is not kind of the goal here. Then it's behaving more like a surface effector. So what we're going to do is we're going to set is trigger to true, which gets rid of our warning. And then let's set the force magnitude to 50. Right? So the force magnitude is how much force is going to be applied each step. The force direction here is important, and this is actually calculated in world space. So rotating the object does not change the force direction. So right now, it's calculated in world space, and it's calculated, let me make sure I get this right. It's calculated counterclockwise. So 0 is going to move us to the right, 90 degrees will move us up, 180 will move us to the left, and 270 will move us down. So, and if you try to put in a value greater than 360, it'll clamp to 359.99. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use the rotation of our object here, which is in world space, right? And then we're going to just paste that in. Okay, so just copy the z-axis rotation and paste it into the force direction. So now it should be moving kind of in this direction. All right, so we could use some, let's use some force variation here just to demo that since we haven't done it. So let's set this to 25, 25. So now we're going to add between 25 and 50 units of force. Hopefully that'll be enough. We can tweak it. And now the drag we're actually going to use here, that's going to be important because I'll show you what happens without the drag. We're just going to fall through it, basically. It's not going to, I don't think it's going to be applying. So you can see it's trying to move us, right? But gravity is pulling us out of the effector zone and down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the drag really high to like 50. And now this is going to become more like a kind of a block of jello. So we get inside. It's moving us. It's not applying enough force to overcome gravity. So let's go to like 100. Almost enough. That'll probably do it. Let's give it a little extra. Let's add it in the force variation just so we can see. Let's add 100. So we'll see. We should be able to see some change. So I think the drag is kind of smoothing things out, why we're not seeing a lot of variation. But basically, this is now adding between 100 and 200 each time it's adding force. So let's go ahead. We'll make another one of these. Let's duplicate this, and we'll make like a little elevator kind of thing. Yeah, actually, let's widen that out, move it up. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And it will do something kind of like that. So he pops out of that and goes into this. And then this, let's make it quite tall. So I'm actually expanding the X, right? Because it's, maybe that's too tall. Because it's rotated. There we go, something like that. And then we'll grab another platform and put it at the top so we have somewhere to arrive. And let's, boop. There we go. All right, let's give that a try. Oh, and actually I made a mistake, which is I didn't set the force field 2 is still going to push, even though, well, that's a good example, right? I rotated it, but it's still set to 17, so it's going to, you'll see what happens. Let's just demo that just so we can hammer that point home. So we get moved along. And we keep going in the same direction, right? Because we're still set to that direction that we set in the in world space, right? So we're still moving in that 17-degree angle. So I'm going to set it to 90, which should start us moving up. We're going to keep that same high drag value so it doesn't fall out of the bottom. So in this case, he's not getting very far in because we need a little more force to make it over the platform, right? So maybe we'll set the drag a little lower so we can get into the middle. And we'll set the force magnitude to 300. So we'll pop out of the top a little bit. Going up. Woo! There we go. We've arrived. And so, you know, if we drop back into this, you can land in the middle of it and it'll push you back up. It's kind of fun. You could also just bounce off it. If the platform wasn't there, it'll just keep bouncing him up and down. Yeah, there you go. Boing. So we got our big sort of block of jello. And you can, okay, actually, this is a good example of the force variation. We can see, let's set it really high. We can see each time he bounces off, he's getting like a different amount of force. Let's set it super high just so we can see. There you go. He's getting now between 301 and 1300, right? So we're adding that kind of randomness. So if you're doing like wind or an explosion or something that was supposed to be a little more chaotic, this might be a good parameter to use. You can also make negative values, which just gets kind of weird when you're, whoop, there we go. That was very strong, right? We could do like a, anyway, yeah. So that's kind of fun. So basically, we've got the force direction, right, which is between 0 and 359.99 in world space. The force magnitude is how much force is being applied each step. The force variation allows us to add some randomness. The drag adds drag to the rigid body while it's in the trigger volume, right? So that drag will go away once we pop out of the other side. And you can kind of see that happening. Angular drag does the same thing for rotation. Now, the force target here is what are we going to be applying the rotation to? The default is rigid body, which will use the center of mass. We can also use the collider. What I'm going to do, let's take our hero. This is going to look a little wacky, but we're going to turn off the fixed angle for the rigid body. And whoa, oh my God, you're going to get seasick. But let's use collider for the area effector. So what should happen is whichever of the two colliders that are attached to the hero, it's going to grab that, and it's probably going to cause him to rotate, which is probably going to look crazy with the camera attached. But anyway, we can get an idea. Whoa, that's really nauseating. Didn't really demo it very well either. Here, let me make a quick thing just to show this rotation thing, because it's kind of interesting. Let's duplicate our platform, make it much smaller, and duplicate it again, and rotate it 90 degrees. So we'll make like a little sort of boomerang thing. And then we'll remove this platform effector from these. I turn off Effector because we're not going to use it, and we're going to add a rigid body 2D. And what you'll see, let's set both of these to rigid body to begin with, and you can see what happens. It's going to, and then we'll make actually, let me not add the rigid body to these. I'll add it to the parent object. Okay, so now we're going to have a compound collider there, right? And we're going to add a rigid body 2D to that. Now, if we drop that into the effector, we should see, whoa, let me get that, fix that. Turn fixed angle on, and, well, maybe we can just jump and follow it, so we can see what's happening. Okay, so we can see, right, we're using the center of mass, so no rotation happens, right? Now, if we switch our two force fields to use collider, we'll see what happens. Oh, I couldn't really see it. Let's see. Force target is collider. Just make sure. What I want is I want it to, might be too much drag actually. Let's just try one more time. Let's move it a little bit so it kind of hits it at an angle. There we go. Yeah, so you can see, right, it starts to rotate. There we go. So whichever of the two colliders hits, it's going to grab that and start applying forces to it, and we get that rotation. So definitely some interesting, gameplay possibilities there, right? And so that's using the force target collider. And you could control the amount of rotation using the angular drag if you wanted to, and make some interesting stuff there. What we're going to do next is, let me just turn off my boomerang here. We don't really need that. What we're going to do next is I'm going to show you guys point effectors. And what a point effector is usually it's used, well, I've usually used it with a circle collider, and it allows you to either push objects away from either the center of a collider or a rigid body, the center of mass, push them away, or to attract them, right? So very useful for making sort of explosions or black holes. And what I'm going to do here, since we're in a kind of a zipping around platformer kind of mode, I'm going to use it to simulate the rings flying out of Sonic when Sonic hits an enemy. And we'll do that with the coins, which is all fun stuff. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a coin. We'll make a coin prefab first. So in my sprites folder, I've got my coin sprite. I'm going to drop that in. Delete sprite from the name just to make it a coin. And we're going to add component rigid body 2D. You can just type rig like I did and it'll come up. Rigid body 2D. It's also under Physics 2D, rigid body 2D. Add that in, and we're also going to add component Physics 2D, circle collider 2D. And so let's put this over here where our play is just so we can see it. That's going to cause our coin to fall and to be affected by physics stuff. And so that's actually all we need for that. Let's just take that and drag it into our prefabs folder. And we can delete it from the hierarchy. And next, we're going to make a prefab that will be our spray of coins. So we're going to make a new game object, create empty. We're going to call this coin spray. And because it's empty, I'm just going to add a label, a nice pink label. We'll put it over here. And then we're going to add a circle collider 2D, Physics 2D, circle collider 2D. And we're going to set it to isTrigger and use by Effector just like we did for the area effector. And then we're going to add our point effector. So we're going to go add component, Physics 2D, point effector 2D. Okay. Then let's scale up the radius of our spray because the forces are only going to be applied while we're in contact with this. So let's set it to 5 just for a nice round number. And then, so currently the force magnitude is negative. So it means something's going to come into this trigger volume and get pulled to the center. So we could try that with the player. Let's set it to negative 200. And let's set the drag as well so it doesn't fly out the other side. We'll set the drag to 10. We should see. Whoop. We just got sucked into an invisible black hole there. And you can see the player is being pulled into the middle. If we have less drag, I can just show you, or even zero drag, he'll probably fly out the other side. You can see him start shaking around. He'll probably fly out the other side. Let's just try. Oh no. There's enough force to, but you see he does this kind of wanging bounce around before settling into place there. So some drag will help to smooth that out a little bit. But for now, we're actually going to be doing the opposite. We'll go force magnitude positive, which is going to push things away. We can just see how that works. Well, we can't even jump into the volume, right? Because it just pushes us away as soon as we can bounce off it. Boing, boing, boing. Kind of fun. So we're going to use this to instantiate some coins in this area. We're going to randomize the position a little bit so they don't just come out in a stack, and then have them spray off in different directions because they're going to be affected by the point effector 2D. So let's write our first script. We'll go to our scripts folder, create C# script, and we'll call this coin sprayer, and open it up in MonoDevelop. So the first thing that we're going to do is declare a public variable of the type int called numCoins. This is going to be the number of coins that we're going to instantiate, and we're going to set that to 10. We're going to have a public variable of the type GameObject called coin prefab, which you guessed it, is going to hold our coin prefab that we made. And we're going to have a public float called offset range. And I'm just using this to add a little bit of randomization to our spawn position. We can delete update, and then we're just going to have a private function that returns void called spawn coins. And in it, we're going to use a for loop to just instantiate the number of coins set in numCoins. So we're going to say in I equals 0 as long as I is less than numCoins. We're going to keep spawning, and then we're going to add 1 to our I each time we loop through the loop. And here we're going to declare a new vector 2 called spawn offset. And that's going to be equal to a new vector 2, which is going to be from negative offset range to positive offset range. And, whoops. Oh, I'm sorry. What am I doing here? Random. This is going to be, I'm totally spazzing out. This is going to be random.range, and those are the arguments for random.range. So it's going to be a number between negative 1.5 and positive 1.5, a random number, and then we're just going to do that twice. So I had a little mental glitch there. I'm going to copy this, paste it again, closed parentheses, and yes. And then we're just going to instantiate. So we're going to instantiate the object we're going to instantiate is going to be our coin prefab. The position is we're going to cast transform.position to a vector 2 and add our spawn offset. Then we're going to use quaternion.identity for no rotation. And that should be okay. And then we're just going to call our spawn coins method in start. Save. All right, so we're going to save the script. Jump back over to the editor. Add the coin sprayer. Very slowly add the coin sprayer script to our coin sprayer game object. And then we're just going to drag in our coin prefab to the coin prefab variable there. And now, hopefully, I'll play our scene. We should, yep, there we go. It's kind of, well, player's getting knocked around by the coins. Let's see. There we go. We can see it's probably a little too much force there, actually. Let's lower the force. It's flying everything all over the place. There we go. Coins are all getting caught in the effector. That's cool. This is what I mean about this. Like, you never know what's going to happen with all this stuff. This would be super fun. Emergent gameplay possibilities. So, okay, so that's good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make a prefab out of that, and we're going to instantiate it when the player gets hit, right? So let's make a prefab. Drag the coin spray to our prefabs folder, delete it. And then we're going to add to our player a new script that's going to instantiate that when the player hits an enemy. So let's actually, before we do that, let's add our enemy. Just in prefabs, characters. Yeah, so let's add an enemy. This is just the enemy we're just going to use to trigger when the, we'll put him up here on top of the platform. And I'm going to turn off his enemy script so he doesn't move around. And then, you see this weirdness. I don't know why. I'm sure there was some good reason to do this, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zero out the different parts of his body. The eyelid, it's going to be 0. No, not 10, 0. And the eye is going to be 0. It looks really weird if you don't do this. All right, that should be good. And then the front check. This is something to do with the... Oh, I think this is so he doesn't walk off the platform. Anyway, that's fine for now. Let's just make sure. And then, of course, we're going to zero out his Z position. Oh, I need to go back into 2D mode. That's why. And then, yeah, that's all fine. Okay. And then he's just, there he is, sitting on our platform. So when we crash into him, we're going to instantiate our spray of coins. So, all right, so we got our guy to crash into. We've got our spray of coins prefab that we made. And so let's write the other script, tiny little script for our player. I'm going to go to our scripts folder, create C# script, and we'll call this drop coins. Open it up, and in here, this is going to be super duper simple. We're going to delete both of these. Don't need them. And we're going to have a public game object called coin sprayer PF for coin sprayer prefab, and a Boolean called got hit. And then we're just going to use void on collision enter 2D, right? Important to use the 2D version of this, which takes a parameter of the type collision 2D, which we're going to call call. And so basically, whenever our player's collider collides with another object, this is going to, the code in this function is going to be executed. And what we're going to do is we're going to check the tag of the thing we hit. So we're going to say if call.gameObject.compare tag enemy, right? And the enemy prefab has this tag applied to it. And so if the tag of the object we collided with is enemy and not got hit, right? So got hit is false. We're going to set got hit to true. Got hit equals true. We did just get hit. And we're going to instantiate our coin sprayer PF at transform.position and quaternion.identity, no rotation. So basically, we're just going to check to make sure we hit an enemy. And the reason I put in got hit was when I was testing, it would register the collision multiple times, and so it would fire a bunch of times. What you would probably do here in a real game is you would have like a cooldown timer for how many times you can repeatedly get hit. So maybe like 1/10 of a second, and then just reset got hit after 1/10 of a second, for example. But since this is just a demo, I'm not going to go through all that. But so we'll save that, jump out, and add drop coins to the player. And I think the null reference we're getting there is that the enemy, I think, is looking for the score. Yeah. I think that's what it is, but I turned it off. Maybe we have to take it off entirely. Okay. All right. And then we added our drop coins, and now we just need to add in our coin sprayer prefab. So we'll go to our prefabs folder, grab our coin spray, drop it on, and now when we collide with the enemy, we should instantiate a bunch of coins shooting off into different directions. Going up, and bing, and of course, he goes flying, everybody goes flying, right? So you'd probably want to, whoop, and they're coming, burp, burp, burp. Oh, and also I should probably destroy the effector, right? It's just sitting there. So obviously not ready for production, all this stuff, but for the demo, it's fine, right? It's just showing some ideas for what's happening, what we could do with these effectors. You could also do, for example, attach an effector to the player so that he sucks in coins. Let's do that. That'll be kind of fun. He'll also, let's say if we put the coins on a layer, right? I say layer, put them on pickups, and then we will let's add a coin collector empty child object to the player. And we'll add a circle collider. Let's see if this works. We'll set the radius to maybe 3 is trigger used by Effector. And we'll add a point effector 2D. And let's set it to like -100. So what should happen now is when he gets close to the coins, he'll suck them in. which will be crazy when we fire them out and suck them in at the same time, but that should be interesting. Let's try it. Okay. I think that works. And then, okay, and then the only thing we're going to affect is going to be nothing, and then just the pickups. Let's try that. And I'm just playing around now. Whoop. Yeah. Whoa. So, right, we should put some code on the coins to say when you collide with the player, deactivate or destroy and add to the player's coin score and all that stuff, but we don't have any of that stuff. So now we're just kind of hemmed in by our coins. Whoa. Woo. Kind of fun. Anyway, yeah, so that's our demo for today. So we went over platform effectors, right? Which we'll run the whole thing, right? Let's send the player back to the beginning where he's supposed to start. We'll go through everything that we made, and let me turn off this craziness for the time being. So we've got our platform effectors, which allow us to make one-way. Well, that cloud looks crazy. One-way platforms. Surface effectors, which allow us to make sort of conveyor belt style things. Area effectors, which allow us to make these kind of volumes that we can enter into and add forces. And then a point effector in this case, which allows us to add radial forces, either pulling things in or pushing them out. And yeah, those are the new 2D effectors in Unity 5. And let me see if there's anything else. Oh, I didn't go through all the settings in the point effector. Let me just go through that real quick. Force magnitude is the same as what we saw in the other ones, right? It's how much force is added. Force variation is the same. It's a random range, right, between 0 and the number specified, positive or negative. The distance scale is interesting. The distance scale just means we can say, I want to simulate a larger distance. So if I set it to 5, everything is going to move slower. Like if I had a space game and I wanted to feel like everything was really far apart and we wanted to have the physics forces applied much more slowly, you could, without scaling the colliders, without changing the forces, you could just change the distance scale and change the physics simulation. The drag and the angular drag are the drag coefficients that are applied to the rigid body while it's in contact with the effector. And then the force source, in this case, we can choose between rigid body, which is the center of mass, or collider, which is the center of the collider. Now, it's worth mentioning, we could have multiple colliders attached to an effector, all using the effector, or you could use this to select which collider is being used by the effector. So maybe some interesting possibilities there. Force target is like what we saw with the area effector. So if it's set to rigid body, it will not cause rotation, and if it's set to collider, it potentially will cause rotation. And then the force mode just allows us to, if we're set to constant, it just applies the same force every time based on the combination of the magnitude and the variation. Inverse linear will apply based on the distance from the force, the distance between the force source and the force target. So it will apply more force the closer you get if you're using negative values and less if you're using positive values. Anyway, it'll change the amount of force applied based on the distance, and inverse squared is just it's just a square root curve for the same function, right? So based on the distance. And so, yeah, that is our show for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. New people, good to see all the regulars back again. Thanks to Mike Geig for stopping in to answer questions. I'm going to hang out and answer some questions from the chat. If you have more questions about this, we're going to prioritize those first. And then if you got other stuff, we'll see if we have time to help you with that. And yeah, thanks very much for watching. Steak Pinball says, ship it. I agree, dude. It's done. Game of the year, 10 out of 10. Wood physics again. All right. Billions of dollars. I need billions of dollars. So that's totally relevant to me. I totally need billions of dollars actually right now. So that's a really good idea. Oh, Southclaw asks, can I create a basic game without coding? You can. You can use things like Playmaker or many of the other excellent visual scripting tools on the asset store, But I would recommend that if you think this is something you want to, do for any period of time, coding is not as hard as you think, and really, really makes things easier once you know how to do just a little bit. I taught myself. I never went to school for it. I don't have a computer science degree. I'm really not very good at coding, but I know enough to make my little games and make them do the things that they want to do, and that's, for me, that's totally enough. You can, of course, go very deep into it and get very advanced if you're passionate about it, but you don't need to. And you don't need to know a lot of crazy math or physics, and there's a million things on YouTube and the internet that you can look at, including our stuff. So don't be intimidated by coding. If you want to make video games, you should learn a little bit of coding. King Jake Finn says the 2D parallax in 3D space looks nice. Yeah, I like it too. I think it's cool. A little cheap little effect that looks nice. All right. Yeah, you can make those coins into shields to protect the main character. You could have them. I know you can make stuff orbit if you get the drag values and the forces right. There's a lot of fun stuff you could do with this. T1-ish. Well, so you're asking about the wind effect. I would use area effectors for that, and what I would use is a high force variation value, so you get like some randomness, so it feels windish. That's what I would do. I would do like the volume of your space would be an area effector, and then the direction of the wind would be the force direction, and just use a high variation so it kind of feels more random. That's what I would do. And like low drag. Addictive Me is asking, how did you get it so the character can jump through the platforms but still walk on them again? That is using the platform effector, which is Platform Effector 2D is the name of the component, and then you want to make sure that the one-way property is checked. And that's it. It's really easy. Yeah, Kupo77. There is an archived lesson that goes over disappearing platforms. It's in my platformer live training session. Gyro Studios. I just got Ori and the Blind Forest last night, actually, and started playing with my kids. Beautiful game. Just gorgeous. It's the Unity game, by the way. BT dubs. I think the top 3 Metacritic games right now are Unity games. Ori, City Skylines, and something else that I can't remember. It's pretty cool. Gyro Studios. And to continue your question about Ori and the Blind Forest, I have not actually got to the part with the wind effect, so I got to check it out. I don't know how they did their wind effects, but I know that they did use it was like a slightly customized version of 5, because they started in the 5, I think they started in the 5 alpha. They started with 5 pretty early. And they did have some support from some people on our team in making it work, because they have like a big seamless environment and stuff, and there were a few things that they had to they needed a little support with, but I don't know how they did the physics stuff, but they did use Unity 5, so it might have been the Effectors. Yes, video series on how to make Ori and the Blind Forest in Unity, 1,000-part series. Yeah, that sounds about right. Takes 900 years to watch. I mean, they had a big team working on that. Actually, I don't know how many people. But anyway, great looking game. All right, guys, so I'm going to go off mic. I'll keep the chat window open. If you guys have any last-minute questions, I'll answer via text. But thanks again for everybody coming out, all the new people, all the regulars. Great to see you all. Adam will be back with you next week at the same time. Mike is going to jump in with a couple sessions in coming weeks, and then I'll be back with you guys soon.